As much as I love JRPGs with high-stakes stories, sometimes I'm in the mood for something a bit more down-to-earth and relaxed. This is one of the reasons why I'll occasionally decide to go through an Atelier game. And when one of those Atelier Fey moods took over me, Atelier Yumia, the Alchemist of Memories, and the Envisioned land had just come out. If you're unfamiliar with Atelier, yeah, they all kinda have long titles like that. Anyway, I picked up Atelier Yumia, played through it over the course of 32 hours, and came out of it with conflicted feelings towards it. Thank you to my supporters. If you liked the video, consider subscribing, or even joining the Patreon. Link on screen and in the description. If you do, you'll be thanked in the videos, be able to watch each video a week early, as well as gain access to bonus videos. Atelier Yumia takes place in a world that is pretty antagonistic towards alchemy. Alchemy in Atelier in general lets you take base components and synthesize them into something else. It's just this game's magic-based crafting system. Before the events of the game, there was a major catastrophe where some guy set off the equivalent of an alchemy nuke in the middle of a city and rendered an entire continent practically uninhabitable now that it's flooded with mana. Yumiya joins up with a research team to see if they can solve this issue, and because Yumiya is an alchemist and can easily manipulate mana, she uniquely can solve this issue. This sets up Yumiya's arc through the game as someone who has to come to terms with alchemy and the internal moral struggle of whether or not to keep practicing alchemy, something she's not clear is even the right thing to do. Yumiya knows that she uses alchemy for good and that it can be and is used to help, but also has to reconcile with the fact that literally everyone she comes across has been fucked over by alchemy, like family deaths and home uprooting and body modification type fucked over. I like her arc through this game. Both positions of her struggle are clearly defined, both the internal ideals and the external reality of the situation, and it explores it enough to be satisfying. The Atelier series is called Atelier because it revolves around an atelier. Fucking shocker, I know. And to no one's surprise, you also get an atelier in this game. But for some reason, Atelier Yumia de-emphasizes the atelier throughout the game and even alchemy itself. So you unlock the atelier and are given some basic tutorials as to how alchemy works. Then the beginning of the game ends, you leave the tutorial, and as time passes you start to wonder, when will the game want me to return to the atelier and do alchemy? And it just doesn't. The atelier itself becomes useless once you unlock base building. There are designated plots of land throughout the world that you are allowed to make your own field atelier. You can put down the tools you need to synthesize without ever stepping foot inside the atelier. Even then, there's rarely any point to interact with the synthesis anyway. To give some context here from prior games, in other Atelier games you would go out and explore for resources and use those resources to better synthesize equipment and items to allow you to better explore. It's a very simple cyclical gameplay loop that feeds one half of the game into the other, but very few quests in the game asks you to synthesize at all. There are a couple that do, but they're rare. This goes for side quests too. I, not even once playing through the whole game, received a single quest to synthesize anything with a minimum quality or anything with a trait slot. You can just slop together garbage with the bare fucking minimum of effort, turn that shit in, and the game will tell you, wow, this is perfect. What makes this worse is that, unlike in other Atelier games, there is no alchemy level. When you synthesize in Atelier Yumia, Yumia doesn't increase in anything. Nothing is locked behind an alchemy level, so you don't need to synthesize anything. Everything you need is already available to you from second one. There's no point in making most things on the synthesis list, because what's the point? None of it is required in any aspect. The only time I sat down and engaged with and tried to learn the alchemy system in this game was in region 3 of 4. Barely did any synthesis before that and didn't do shit afterwards. At that point, I found some recipes to get some decent armor and weapons and decided then that that was a good time to finally upgrade my gear. And it was here that I learned that there was very little cleverness in making something good. There are no item trees and there's very little strategy in the synthesis itself. Just fill the circles with the best shit you got and you get high stats out of it. At this point you unlock a duplicator, which you just make the best ingot you can, max out its fucking quality stat, shove it in and duplicate it to the max for basically free. After that, you just use that ingot and only that ingot in every single slot and you can easily max out your stats. Straight up, I went from weapons and armors hovering around the 40s in stats to shit that is in the 400s to 600s in stat numbers. It fucking killed any and all difficulty after that point. And it wasn't even hard to get that at all. Atelier Yumia instead shifts its focus away from alchemy towards base building and exploration. I'm going to start with what I like with base building. which this is going to be a short list, you can place furniture like chairs and shit in the air. So you'll fast travel to a camp and you'll see your squad just chilling, floating up in the air. I laughed a bit when I saw that. And that's about it for what I like. I get that there are people that fuck with base building, but I just don't. I want to fuck with alchemy. That's why I'm playing an Atelier. If I wanted to play a game whose core premise that you're selling to me was base building, I'd play that game instead. In most games with base building, I'm not there to make pretty bases. That's not the game to me. So base building just becomes hitting bare minimum thresholds on the checklist. You want 2 chairs and at least 1 wall? That's all you're getting. You want some number of comfort? I'm gonna just spam beds until I get there. I don't give a fuck. What makes it worse is that base building has a much larger presence in this game than alchemy does. Way more quests ask you to build shit. You'll go up to a guy and Yumier will be asked, "Hey, can you make me a dozen beds?" "Yeah, get to base building, bitch." There is no, "Hey, can you synthesize wool and wood of a certain quality with certain traits so that we can hand it off to a craftsman to make beds?" No, just throw them down so they can sleep like sardines on this fucking pier. Outside of all that, the game's actual primary focus is on exploration. You run around, hauling ass as Yumier. Damn, look at her go! Those legs aren't just because the character designer was getting off while drawing her. I mean, they probably were, but they be schmoovin'. Yumier's also got jumps insane enough to make an NBA recruiter salivate. Mountains and cliffsides are a mere suggestion when you can easily scale that shit to the point that I don't even know if it was even intended for me to be able to do all that. It's even harder to tell considering that this shit is occasionally buggy. Nothing aggravating though, there's a little whiff of skunk in the air, but not enough to detract from the experience. Every time there's a camera bug I was popping off how fucked up it got with it being shoved in a character model, not being able to see anything in the scene. Or sometimes you'll run across some really intense Z fighting, or maybe even face through the floor of an elevator. That shit made me laugh seeing Yumier refuse to change her Y coordinates for a couple seconds. But one of my favorite bugs that happened was during a fight in Rutger's character quest. I was fighting this big fucking alligator and an attack recoiled me into the tree topology. There I stopped fighting and my new task was to see how far I can take this and how far up the tree I can climb. Shit was fun as hell. Especially when the camera would pan back to the fight and you'd see the alligator fucking homing attack into Yumier 100 feet into the air. Regardless, it's still enjoyable to just run around, get into fights, and gather resources. Your movement kit is solid and satisfying and it's very quick and smooth to run by and scoop up whatever's on the ground. It hits the dopamine enough that I was enjoying the exploration. One of my favorite parts about the exploration was using Yumier's rifle for puzzles, gathering resources, or shooting it just for fun. This is going to be really hard to convey over really any method outside of getting hands-on with a controller, but I'll try my best. So I played this game on PS5, right? Some games utilize the DualSense's triggers in cool ways, and I thought that the way Atelier Yumia used the triggers was pretty cool. Whenever you pull out the gun and going to shoot your load of bullets, the DualSense trigger has a fair amount of resistance on the pull up front. It tries to replicate the squeeze of a trigger by asking you to squeeze the trigger with every pull. It's a very minor thing, but it makes me really like just casually shooting the gun in this game just for the hell of it. Resources be damned, I want to press the fun button. Around the start of the second region in the game, during the main quest line, you're given a straight up motorcycle called the Procella for you to use freely during your exploration. I like riding around on the Procella. It's fast, it's got a visually satisfying sense of speed, it's fun to fuck around with when it comes to platforming and see what you can get away with, and it's a more engaging way to travel fast rather than resort to fast traveling all the time, especially if the destination isn't that far away. It's some good quality of life where at any moment you can get on and go, like 10 fucking times Yumier's run speed. And Yumier already hauls ass as is. And it's fun to ride off cliffs because fuck it, why not? You don't take fall damage when riding it. But here's the thing. I think the Procella negatively impacts the experience of the game as a whole. Is riding around on it fun? Yes. But just because it is fun doesn't mean that it can also be detrimental to the game as a whole, which I believe it is. The environments in this game are really nice. They're creative and the art direction is solid. The dense, lush forests are pretty fucking cozy, and the grape flavored mushroom landscape is a unique looking area that I think looks pretty. But I can't even tell you about any memorable locales in regions 3 and 4 because I barely saw them. When something cool looking is on screen for at most 2 seconds, now last seen in the rearview mirror, it is really hard to enjoy the environment. The artistry of it is gone to the player. If you didn't have Procella at this point, you'd be able to take in the world at a slower pace and actually drink it in, savoring the sips rather than chugging it down, getting to the bottom of the cup, racing to your destination. There's also several environmental puzzles where the game has you face a sheer cliff and it tells you, alright, figure the fuck out how to get down to the bottom. To which I respond, bet. Jump on my whip, embrace my inner F-Zero, and boost the fuck off that cliff. Again, why not? I don't take fall damage while on it. Why take the intended path when I can safely take the jump and get to the destination faster? I'm not saying I think that the Priscilla should be taken out. What I think should have happened is that you get it at the ass end of the game in Region 4. It should have been an endgame unlock given to the player to make getting 100% easier, not an early game part of your kit. The Atelier series is a series of traditionally turn-based combat. You take a swing at an enemy on the map and now you're being prompted with what action you want to do next. I'm sure most people are familiar with the concept. But in recent years with the release of the Roadside games, the Atelier series have been flirting with a more active time battle, where instead of turns, everyone just swings their shit whenever their cooldown is done. Yumier continues in that direction, leaning more on the action side rather than a turn-based style of combat. So you've got an inner and an outer range where you're given different attacks based on which circle you're in. You've got a cooldown on your attacks, but you can freely rotate between them and there's very little downtime. Enemies attack, and when they do, it's either direct a single target or an area of effect. Both attacks are marked by the enemy flashing and a shing sound effect on every attack, with the AoEs having the area of attack highlighted and acting as a timer. Both attacks you can either block or dodge. Sounds very action-y gamey. Since the Atelier franchise has been traditionally turn-based for over 20 years, you're gonna have people not fuck with the action stuff as hard or just not be as good with it, which is why the difficulty of combat has been fucking neutered. Okay, I like action games. I've played a fair bit of them and I'm no stranger to that style of gameplay, but Atelier Yumia is not made for fans of A Devil May Cry. It's made for Atelier fans first, which means that it has to be easy and approachable for those not used to action games or those not wanting high-octane action at that time. It is really easy to not take damage. The dodge in this game is extremely forgiving. As I mentioned, there's both a visual and an audio cue for attacks and when you need to dodge them. Straight up, there were times where I'd look away from the game for a minute to read a Discord message, and I'd still be able to cleanly dodge attacks because I'd press the button whenever I'd hear the shing, which is when you should press the dodge button. But also the active frames on dodging is insanely high to the point of being comical. I want to say it's at least half a second of active frames, and if it's not, it sure as fuck feels like that. Of course, it's not as forgiving as just being able to win by mashing, as you will eventually get hit if you do that. But so long as you pay attention to the rhythm of the shing, you won't get hit. To put this shit in perspective, the game was literally not working as intended during the fight in Rutger's character story, and I was still able to dodge attacks with no problem. Despite not being able to see what was happening, I was still able to dodge the alligator trying to jump me while still 100 feet in the air. Once you learn to pay attention to the audio cues, nothing can hit you. I have conflicted feelings towards Atelier Yumia. I don't think it's a bad game. The moment-to-moment gameplay is fun, it's got enough juice in its exploration, combat, art direction, character design, and music to get the good brain chemicals producing. But I don't think that this is a good Atelier game. So much of the core Atelier identity is gone. The fucking Atelier Iris games are more of an Atelier than Atelier Yumia. I want to engage with the synthesis, I want to engage with what makes Atelier unique, but that just isn't here. The game's emphasis being placed elsewhere made me confused. As I played through, as I was given more main story and side quests, I kept asking, when will the synthesis come? And it just didn't. Also, this game was fucking released with a $70 price tag? What bullshit. Do I think you should play Atelier Yumia? Not for that fucking price, I don't. Even if you are the biggest Atelier fan. I do think that if you are in the mood for something on the more chill side of the spectrum, then yeah, this has you covered. It's not a bad game, but only consider picking up down the line for a deep discount. Maybe play Atelier Yumia after getting it on sale, but only after you play the other, better Atelier games that are more representative of its own series.
樽をご存知でない？樽。
樽みたい。
樽。